In this first module, we're going to talk about planning and installing and configuring Windows Server 2012. Our topics include Introduction to Server 2012, describing Server 2012 management, planning and installing Server 2012, and finally configuring Server 2012. Let's talk about why you would even want a local server. Let's talk about two environments, having local clients and servers versus having a cloud. So some people might say, you know, with cloud services, with the fact that I can just have a provider provide me Exchange and authentication and SQL Server and Office, why don't we just all connect across the cloud? Why do we even have local servers? Well, there are a number of reasons why we might need to do this. One thing is you may have a local area network and you've got clients here and you need to manage their addresses and their name resolution. You want to set up your own DHCP server and your own DNS server, and you don't want them doing that across the internet. Another possibility is that you want local file and print services, and you want people to be able to get to a local file server where the files are right there, not something stored across the internet, and you want to be able to print right here, not send a print job to some other place. Another possibility is that you need to manage your own authentication. You can't be having someone else managing your users. You need your own database with your own usernames and passwords. Maybe there's a legal requirement for that. So you can't just go offloading it to some provider. These are some of the reasons why we might want to do this. There are other reasons too. Maybe you just flat out don't have the infrastructure. Like I remember I was on a job in Africa and we were in a developing nation, and we just simply did not have the infrastructure to have cloud-based services. Forget it. We had to have local servers. I mean, we were still using these. Internet access was extremely expensive. So what we did was we deployed local servers, and if we needed to replicate one server to another, well, we had to plan that very carefully, and sometimes we had to do it over the cellular system. We had to have local servers. So it depends on your environment. Maybe cloud is good for you, maybe local is good for you. And you know, the nice thing about Server 2012 is you can do both. You can have a hybrid. You can have your own private cloud, you can have a hosted cloud, you can have your own local servers, and you can control all of them from your local area. You might have heard people talk about role and feature, and they're not very clear on the difference. Well, really, a role in server is a collection of features. A role is sort of a general category of some service that the server offers, and it's made up of a bunch of features. Let's take a look at the different roles in Server 2012. The first one we can see here is Active Directory Certificate Services. You can manage your own certificates. You can dole them out to people, use group policy to hand them out. People can connect by a website and go get their certificate. You can put them on smart cards. We'll talk a little bit more about certificates later. The next one is Active Directory Domain Services. We used to just simply call it Active Directory, but now we call it ADDS. And that still means we have domain controllers and trees and domains and forests and trusts and organizational units. We'll be looking at Active Directory Domain Services in great detail soon. The next one is Active Directory Federation Services. I really like this one, and you probably encounter it all the time without even realizing it. In ADFS, you can have two organizations that normally have no relationship to each other besides a business relationship. You've got your forest of people, I've got mine, might not even be both Microsoft, but you've got people who have to access my stuff. I really don't want to be authenticating your users, and I really don't want a list of your users. I would just like to know that they came from your side. So with ADFS, you can create a trust relationship with me, and then the users who come over to use my resources, my files or folders or database or whatever, they just present something called a claim. They're claiming to come from their side. I trust that side, so come on in, and you can use the stuff that I have. Another service is Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, ADLDS. If this server is not going to be a domain controller, and yet it still has to have users and passwords, we can have sort of a lightweight version of Active Directory. Now, if you've worked with Exchange or some standalone servers where you had to have users and passwords, but you didn't have Active Directory, like maybe you had an edge server out in a perimeter network, that's where we use AD/LDS. Another one that's really cool is Active Directory Rights Management Server. AD/RMS allows you to have conditions whereby people can print or read or forward. So maybe I'll have some rules that say, yeah, when you create an email and you send it, you as a user can say, okay, this group of people, they can forward it, but that group of people, they cannot. And this group of people can print, and those people can save. So you can set conditions under which people can do something to whatever the file is, be it an email or a file or something. So AD/RMS, extremely cool feature. Or you could just want different application servers like a web server or a SQL server or an Exchange server. Of course, Server 2012 is now the new platform for all of those. And then, of course, we have the core infrastructure services like DHCP for handing out IP addresses to clients. And we have DNS for name resolution. We're going to be looking at those in a little more detail soon. And then maybe you even have fax server, like I've got a whole bunch of salespeople on the floor, and I'm not going to give them all a fax machine, and of course I'm not going to make them walk to a fax machine. They just submit the fax to my fax server, which queues them all up and sends all the faxes out in a batch. Or we could simply have file servers, what we now call file and storage services. Here's another one that is free, that you don't have to download, and that's Hyper-V. Hyper-V is extremely cool. It is the virtualization platform. It allows us to run virtual machines, whole operating systems inside of our server. We'll talk a little bit about that in greater detail later. There's also Network Policy and Access Services, or NPAS, or NPAS as some people call it. Now, here's the cool thing about this. I've got mobile users, they go home with their laptop, kids get on the laptop, playing games, downloading who knows what, the laptops become infected with viruses. Now the person wants to connect remotely from home. When they make the connection, this thing is loaded with viruses, maybe they don't even have the firewall up. I can require these machines that connect to prove their health. You've got your patch level to a certain amount, you've got the latest antivirus signatures, you've got your firewall set a certain way, you've got certain updates. If you can't prove that, you can't connect. So Network Policy and Access Services allows us to control those kinds of remote users, or even users that just simply come and plug into a switch. They have to prove their health before they can actually get on the network. Really, really cool service. Another one, remote access. Actually, Network Policy Access Services is part of remote access. This is where we can just allow people to connect while they're out in the field. Connect from home, connect from a hotspot. I'm in a coffee shop, I'm at the airport, I can connect. And there are a bunch of different ways that we can do that. There's also remote desktop services. If you're an administrator, you've probably used it plenty of times. I don't want to physically walk over to the server room to get onto a server's desktop to take a look. So instead, I'm going to make a remote desktop connection, and then I'll see the desktop of the server right here in front of me. Or hey, maybe it's not even in the same building or campus. Maybe it's in another town or even in another country, and I need to see that server's desktop. So I can use RDS so I can remotely get that desktop. Another one is volume activation services. We have the ability to use one license, a volume license, and activate a whole bunch of instances of the operating system or software. We also have the good old web server, IIS, and we have Windows Deployment Services, WDS. This was the old RIS server, basically a souped up TFTP server with some authentication thrown in. This WDS allows us to, on the LAN, have an image and just roll it out to a whole bunch of clients all at once, across the LAN, using multicasting even. We'll get back to that later. Then, of course, how about patch management? Windows Server Update Services, WSUS. You know, because of all of the security problems that go on day to day in the internet, vendors are putting out patches constantly, sometimes several times a day. And we download these patches, and sometimes the patches aren't appropriate for some of our clients. Maybe this patch breaks that application, or this patch just doesn't work with those, or we don't need this patch or whatever. We're downloading maybe 10, 20, 50, 100 patches, and we'd like to try them out before we roll them out. So with WSUS, we can take a look at the patches and we can choose to approve or decline the patches, and then we roll them out.